Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? Are you ready? Get ready, y'all. Get ready.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Rocket Networker podcast. I always like to begin with a silly networking story. When I was 10 years old, my brother played football for the University of Toledo Rockets. At age 10, during the summer, I would ride my bike to the University of Toledo to watch practice and gather footballs for the players. Little did I know that later in my life, Rocket football players would become an important part of my personal and professional network. While not their teammate, we share a common bond through our love of Rocket football and the University of Toledo. Their stories and success always amaze me. And that's where today's Rocket Networker guest comes in, Al Thigpen. Al is lead operating advisor for Nautic Partners, a private equity firm in Providence, Rhode Island. He also serves as chair of the board of directors of EmpiRX Health and as a board member on multiple other pharmaceutical and healthcare related companies. Al, thanks for making time in your busy schedule to join us on the Rocket Networker podcast.
It's my pleasure, Rick. Great to be with you.
So first off, you're working with a company in Providence, Rhode Island, but if my memory serves me right, you live in Chicago.
That is correct. Live in Chicago, have been for the past 25 years, give or take. And I think in today's world, most of the work is conducted virtually anyways. You hop on a plane, you travel, you hop on Zoom, you take care of business, and it all works for sure.
That's true. It's a different world today than when we came out of college. That's for sure. So, Al, what I like to do on the Rocket Networker podcast is I like to model a thing I call the threads of connectivity. In simple terms, I like to talk about the little things that connect us at a personal level rather than on the business side of things. Because I think you know probably better than most that trust comes from the little things that connect us as human beings rather than just the work things. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is kind of begin our dialogue by going back in time. Let's go back a number of years and let's talk about your hometown. So where did you grow up?
Grew up Ohio native, Rick. Grew up in Northeast Ohio, which I tend to call the cradle of all football, but I grew up in Warren, Ohio. And back when I grew up, Warren was a steel GM automotive, blue collar, working kind of town, and spent my entire life there until I ended up going to the University of Toledo. But if I go back now and look at it, it's not unlike a lot of industrial part of America, and it is much more impoverished than what it was when I was growing up.
Right. Yeah, that's common through the Midwest. And it's interesting to see some of the towns kind of revitalizing a little bit, but still probably a long way to go, right?
That's for sure. And we're fortunate, like in the Warren, Ohio area, when I went to high school, I went to a small private school called John F. Kennedy High School. But it was one of those schools that it was a Division III school in Ohio at the time, but we competed on a Class I level. Okay. Just because we just had really, really strong football heritage in that area. And that's how I got recruited to go to Toledo in the first place. But one of my teammates at JFK was a gentleman by the name of Tim Ryan. Okay. And if you follow politics in Ohio, Tim was, a U.S. House of Representatives for the longest period of time in that Youngstown, Girard, Warren, Ohio area, and he has been such an advocate for the revitalization and regrowth of that whole Northeast Ohio corridor. Mm-hmm. And he's done some things with unions in general, and he is a close friend of the family, and he and I have been in contact over many, many, many times. Back to your threads of connectivity. Mm-hmm. And, Tim and I define on a personal nature just because we both grew up with that. We both went to the same high school together, played football together in high school. And here he goes on to lead this extraordinary political career. He has since backed out of that, but, he was very instrumental on bringing, the development of a new EV plant to Lordstown, Ohio, which is going to create a lot of jobs in that general area. He's done some things that are just really important to kind of, to your point earlier, revitalize some of those areas that have lost out due to, automobile, steel, some other industrials that have been since kind of like pilfered out across the country.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting when we talk about the threads. That's why I like to talk about hometown and family. And you mentioned your high school, because those relationships that we begin early on like that, those last the lifetime. And it's interesting that our friends from grade school and high school in our neighborhood, we don't care what work you do, right? We don't care, because
Oh,
when we knew
no
you,
question about it.
when we knew you, you weren't a successful healthcare executive. When we knew you, you were playing football at the park, right?
Riding bikes until the street lights come on, and drinking
Right.
water out of hoses, and I don't have three heads anymore, and it's
Yeah.
it's funny because my kids today tend to laugh when we tell stories about growing up like kids in the 70s and the early 80s, and
Mhm.
life was very, very different back then. And I look at them and the relationships that they're building entirely different than the ones that I clearly had. And as much as I adore my upbringing in Warren, Ohio, and coming from a super blue collar area, and with this scrappy fighting type of attitude, it undoubtedly led me to the University of Toledo. And I think, that those relationships and that connectivity at the University of Toledo has been just an absolute consistent foundation as part of my professional career and even my personal career. And they still are to this day. I mean, just like you said, you've grown up in the football business your entire life. And there's probably 40 guys who I still keep in contact with all through the thread of football. And it's amazing, some of their lives and their stories. And it's actually inspiring to hear and listen to them.
It is, that's for sure. So let's talk about that a little bit. You mentioned high school a little bit, and you mentioned football a little bit. Talk about your high school experience. Obviously, it sounds like you played football, but did you do any other type of student involvement in that when you were in high school, or were you pretty much a sports guy?
I was primarily a lot of sports guy, and I will tell you, sports and work. Quite frankly, there was three things. And now, I grew up. I wasn't in a very well-to-do family to start off with, Rick. And if I wasn't, going to school and playing sports, then I was also working. And I used to work at this family, close friends of the family restaurant in Northeast Ohio, and was washing dishes since I was 8 years old. And then, as soon as I get to high school, I end up becoming, one of the cooks there. So I actually learned how to cook really, really, really good Italian food throughout my entire high school career, which benefited me
Cool.
later. It's still a love of mine. It's become a passion of mine to cook. It's actually a stress reliever for me. That I can spend hours in the kitchen and sit with my family and talk to them about the day and pull things together. And it's actually a rewarding experience. But sports, clearly a lot of school. I was took pretty heavy class loads, a lot of AP classes, and fortunately was able to be really strong in math and sciences, and led me to a strong pharmacy healthcare career. But it also allowed me to pretty much almost exempt my first year out of Toledo, because I
Wow.
had such really
Right.
good credits going into school. So, which helped me a lot, because I was I didn't expect to play, and I ended up playing. And it was the adjustment between high school and college, as was not the simplest thing for an 18, 19-year-old kid getting there.
Right. Right. So how did you decide to go to the University of Toledo? Were you obviously playing football and academics were strong, but what was your thought process around that decision?
It's a great question, and I will tell you that as my high school career, I loved playing football, and I played football as a release for me. It's not too often you get the ability to take out your anger and aggression in a controlled fashion, and be able to hit and just really get all your anger out on the field, and do it in a controlled manner. And football was just a release for me from that perspective. But also I got pretty good at it. And I never, even probably for the first 3 years, I never dreamed of even playing football as the next level outside of high school. And, ironically, going into my junior year of high school, I ended up getting this letter at the house, which I have no idea how they got my address, but the letter was from Lou Holtz. And Lou Holtz was actually head coach at Notre Dame at the time, obviously, but he's recruiting another individual in that Northeast Ohio area, and I was going up against this kid, and they said, "My Lord, we like how you handled this kid. This kid is somebody who's on our radar, and now that we saw how you played on the film against him, we're going to start tracking you." And I'm like, dang, that's pretty cool.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So it was cool. So then all the recruiting starts, and I ended up having a pretty strong following from offers from schools, and I end up getting an offer from Toledo. And what was interesting is that almost all of the visits that I have taken when I went, I narrowed it down to two. I always knew graduating pharmacy graduating high school, I was going to go into the area pharmacy. It was something that was important to me. I loved it. I studied it before I graduated. The job acceptance rate was really, really high. The pay scales were really, really high. And it's something that I was passionate about. And I narrowed my choice down to the University of Pittsburgh. Mike Gottfried was the head coach at the time in the University of Toledo. So I go to my visits, and I end up sitting across the table from Danny Simrel, who was, my coach for my freshman and sophomore year. And Danny was the only coach that asked me what did I want to do after football. And, we were talking about pharmacy. And in part of my visit, Coach Simrel had actually lined up for me to talk to the dean of the pharmacy school. And I think, Danny approached it at a point where, football is football, and we're going to build some really strong fundamentals in you as a man and as a human being, but there's such a small percentage that make it, after the fact as a career. And we want you to be super successful, and I want to give you that opportunity. And I like Danny. I mean, he was just a really good, really strong person when it came to the character of a man that he was building, and the fact that he was so focused on, my well-being in academics. It was something that I was attracted to, and it was a no-brainer for me to make that decision.
That's great to hear that story. Dan's definitely a great guy for sure. So you get to Toledo, and talk a little bit about your first couple of years. Pharmacy's not easy. You're studying, and so's football. You're studying that too. So how'd that go?
It was not easy, and I will tell you, there were some moments where I completely doubted myself across the board there. So I go into my freshman year. This is 1988. So I go into my freshman year, and we go to summer camp, and you're just like a culture shock on really quickly on how football is conducted. From high school to a D1 school now. And we're going through things. So we check into camp, and we're, hanging out in Parks Tower for 2-a-day camp. And all I have is gym clothes and duffel bags and, stuff that we're going to do with football. I haven't even decided to move into, to prepare for school just yet. And I remember we were preparing for the first game we were going down to play Ohio University as the opener. And I didn't even know up until the week that we were going to play them, Rick, that I had made the travel squad.
Okay.
So this is when they're handing. I practice with the ones and the twos, and we're switching off. And you may remember George Limburger. He was the starting center at the time, and George was a hell of a player. And I'm backing up George, and we're taking reps back and forth. And I remember sitting in the meeting room that week, and I get handed this big binder, and it's a travel. It's like the scouting report for OU. And I'm like, why do I get this? George looks at me and says, "Welcome to the travel squad." And I'm like, nice. Well, what does that mean? And they said, well, you need to get a suit and this and that. So I call my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I need a suit, and bring it on up. I got to leave, blah, blah, blah. So she brings up a suit and goes from there. But the reason I tell you that story is that it became really, really important to me to continue to perform for football. And we go down and we play that game. The first play of the third quarter of the game, George ends up blowing his knee out.
Oh my God.
And John Obrock is the line coach. He looks at me and goes, "Start warming up." I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about? Start warming up." And here I am. I'm just out of high school. I'm planning on getting redshirted. I'm just like, I'm going to learn and kind of practice and, get this year to kind of get some weight up, build some more strength on, blah, blah, blah. And oh, by the way, Rick, I've got 18 credit hours this freshman semester.
Wow.
Of math, sciences, chemistries, everything else that's going on. And I go in and I play, and I didn't miss a play since then. So I ended up playing the rest of the season and didn't get redshirted. But I also ended up not dropping, but, not doing really, really well in some classes. Never failed a class, but got some C's, got some D's, and was really struggling in pharmacy. And it was kind of like a wake up call, and like,
Right.
well, how are you going to balance this and do this? And, because I think once I started to play, when you're running with the first team and you're working out and you're doing so much to stay healthy and try to get to class and sleep and eat and do all this. And the adjustment, number one, was difficult from high school to college. Then you're going from an adjustment from high school football to now D1 football play out of the gate. And you're trying to take on a course load, which, you're dealing with, other classmates of yours that, are only there to go to school. They're not having all this other banked up. So it was really, really difficult. And I remember I told Dr. Thigpen this at the College of Pharmacy a couple of weeks ago, that I had my pharmacy guidance counselor at the time said I should really think about switching majors. And he said, it's too competitive here. You're not going to make it with these grades. And I said, you know what? I said, I got a lot of things going on, particularly with what I'm doing over at the football program. And I said, what I really need is a new guidance counselor, with all due respect. And I ended up, and Danny Simmerl was instrumental in helping me do some of that, which was, again, another big plus to having him as just a true gentleman on getting there. And we made some adjustments, and life was grand from there. But it was incredible. I remember that first fall semester of '88 was incredibly difficult.
That first fall semester for any student at any university anywhere in the world, forget sports, that first semester is a massive adjustment. And then when you add all the things with football and all those things on, so I can't imagine that. But you know what? That's part of the journey that makes you strong, is those moments when things are bad.
No question about it. And I think make you strong, but also having the right support group around you, Rick. I mean, Danny was super supportive. And even through my entire, collegiate career at Toledo, from, 2 years with Simmerl, my year with Saban, year with Gary Pinkel, 3 head coaches in my stint. I mean, all 3 of them were just absolutely 100% focused on academics and, continuing to graduate and do right by the student.
It's interesting knowing the 3 of them, not as a player, but just from being around the program, the 3 of them knew that if they built you as a person, that you would go extra on the field. All 3 of them were smart that way. What was that year with Saban like? Yeah. That was the year of 1990 when you guys won the MAC championship. You came in for 1 year, you guys won it all, and then he left. But what was your experience with Nick Saban?
I have nothing but positive things to say about that experience. Now, I will tell you personally, it was quite a culture shock from a Saban level area of coaching to a Simmerl level area of coaching. And, as much as I love Danny Simmerl as a coach, I do think he was much more of a player's coach. Across the board, which he cared about us, which, I still adore to this day. But Saban came in with a very business-like approach to winning games, and more importantly, even being the student of the game, Rick. I mean, I thought I was really good at scouting and watching film. I never knew how to really read and break down film till he came in. And, which was funny. I tell my kids and other friends of mine this story that, you had to log so many hours under Saban of watching game film, practice film, this and that. And I had such a wacky academic schedule. I mean, I was at school all day, so I'm either watching film late at night or super early in the morning. I couldn't even find a workout partner because of my schedule. So who my workout partner was? Ken Manning. So Manny says, I'll be your partner. I'm like, damn, I can't even cut corners with him now. It's kind of like we went out to the bar last night. We had a couple and was kind of take it easy today. Can't do that with Ken Manning. But not with him. But back to Saban, I will tell you the experience was it was challenging because it was such a cultural change from Simmerl to Saban, number one. But number two, he was so invested in knowing every single detail about the game itself. And as an offensive lineman, him helping educate me on everything I need to know to be a better offensive lineman or call defenses differently. And, we would go back and forth on, some of the film study. Like I was telling you, early in the morning or late at night, he would be the type of person to pop in and just watch film with you and say, what do you see when you see here? And what coverage are they disguising here? And is this guy's blitz or not? So I was learning about like his mindset defensively that made me a better offensive lineman. And we got really, really good. I think you may remember we led the MAC in offense that year.
It was
We had,
year, man.
my God, led the offense in rushing and passing and everything else. And Nick, on the field, we were so good at what we did offensively. He would be like, well, what do you do if I do this? So he would practice blitzes on us defensively. I would say I would do this and I would cover this and I would make this line call and we would do the coverage this way. And he's like, So then he would switch the blitzes up. And he's like, then what would you do? And I'm like, well, we're kind of SOL if you kind of do that one. So we would kind of go back and forth and kind of, which I just thought was one of the best experiences I ever had with him. But I was sad to see him go, but just a true gentleman in the whole school.
So you have this great college experience. You're getting your pharmacy degree. You're playing D1 ball at a top level with top level coaches. Life's good. But all of a sudden, there's this weird thing that sneaks up called life after college. Where did your head go when you got toward graduation? Football's ending. Now what?
Yeah, so a couple of things. That was a difficult spot for me because, I'm around some guys who are thinking about going to the NFL or being attracted to go to the NFL. And I never had aspirations of going, but I did a couple tryouts and when they came to UT, I felt really good about the prospect of it. And then I got to this point where it's like, I would need to drop out of school. I mean, pharmacy is a 6-year program.
Right.
It's not the 4-year program. So I finished my 4 years of eligibility because I wasn't redshirted. I got 2 more years to go. And that's if I finish on time,
Right.
So I took a couple other summer school classes and kind of maneuvered things around to probably get me to 6.5 years to graduate, including summer school. So it was the decision point for me was, okay, you either got to stay in school or I'm going to go to the NFL and try to make a run at this thing. So decided to stay in school, finish my career out, and pharmacy was great. But to your point, Gary Pinkel allowed me to stay on and help with the program, get my education covered and do some things. And when that time came and I was ready to take the state board exam of pharmacy, passed it and said, hey, now you're fully licensed and ready to go. And fortunately, the career opportunities in pharmacy were, 100% job placement out of the College of Pharmacy in a day. And I had my pick of the litter and fortunately landed a job at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, not too far from my house. And it was a huge academic institution and, high energy, high performing, and just had a ball. And that was the beginning and the start of it.
You make that decision, you graduate, you go back toward home, you're working for a great institution. So take us from there. How does life evolve from there? Did you start to meet anyone or have kids, or were you career focused? Did you move? Like, what was next?
Yeah, so a couple of things. My pharmacy career was really based off of relationships with one another, people, or through the course of the job experience itself. I had met some folks at the Cleveland Clinic through the Kaiser Foundation health plans at the time. They were in a joint venture with Cleveland Clinic and got to meet those folks and did a lot of work with them. And they ended up offering me a job to go run basically their Southwest region, which was their Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico markets. And here I am. It's like I never lived outside of Ohio, and they're asking me to move to Texas, and the money was great. It was a big career move for me and managing a ton of people. And I said, hey, let's go. So I was married at the time, no kids, ended up moving to Dallas, Texas. And my son Noah was born down in Dallas, Texas. He's my first. And I had a great career down in Texas with the Kaiser Foundation Family Health Plans. And then we were getting to the point where Kaiser was going to divest out of that region and sell that to another competing health plan, which we did. And through that period, I met a bunch of other people and took a job out in California. So I went from Texas to California, Sacramento area, and was working for a company called HealthNet at the time. And HealthNet was a large integrated health organization, and they needed a lot of help on pharmacy and how to manage pharmacy. My daughter Caitlin was born in California, and I really liked the folks in California up until it's far from home. California to Ohio is a really long way away, and about a year into that career, I get a call from my mom, and she's newly diagnosed with breast cancer. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this is not good. And I don't feel like being this far away from, my mom and this and that. So I was on a plane flying to see her while she was going through her first treatment. And I get a call from a headhunter and says, do you know about this company called Caremark in Chicago? I'm like, I know a lot about them. And they're like, well, we've been given your name, and we think you may be a good candidate for this next senior level position. Are you interested? I said, you know what? I got to connect in Chicago. I'll move my flight. I'll come talk to you guys, and we'll see what happens. Lo and behold, there was, that was a life-changing, career event that got me to this company called Caremark in early 2000. And that started to just probably this springboard of my career from there. And that led to, Caremark we acquired several companies. We ended up selling that company to CVS in 2007, became the largest CVS Caremark organization. At that point in time, I'm controlling well over $50 billion in a P&L and over a couple thousand people that I'm managing. And it was one of the largest integrated delivery systems at the time. And I stayed on there for 4.5 years post-close of that transaction and liked the organization a lot. But I was quite frankly, Rick, getting burned out from a corporate perspective, and decided to make a change and a move and went to work with another colleague of mine who I met at CVS Caremark to start a new company. And that company was called SXC. It was a technology company, privately held technology company in the pharmacy space. Through that move there, we decided to acquire several other companies, kind of build it up. Had acquired some competitors at the time, and then we ended up becoming a publicly traded company and sold that company for a little north of $20 billion to United Healthcare.
Nice, good for you.
And when we sold that company in 2015, I decided to stay on at United Healthcare because the person who I was working with became the CEO of EmpiRX, which is their largest pharmacy operating unit for the health plan side. And I stayed on with him because he wanted me to run their P&L for pharmacy across the board. And at that point in time, there's like $65 billion that you're managing, and it's a big company, and United's this big juggernaut in healthcare. But again, was really kind of tired of the corporate world, and decided to take some time off. And then when I took that time off, I got some calls from some folks at Nautic. And I knew the folks at Nautic because we had acquired some assets from Nautic to build the Catamaran organization that we had sold, and ended up saying yes to them to help them build some companies and sell some companies and be an operating advisor with them full time. And I have been with Nautic ever since. And it's been one of those truly inspiring, thought-provoking and interesting jobs to take, just because, healthcare is always changing, and it's always sustainable. And it's one of those industries that are always needed, even in a recession. And it's something that's really, really important to me that I'm passionate about. But I know that's a long story to get you there across the career, but it was awesome. It was a lot of networking to get there.
I was just going to say, when you look at the audience here, the Rocket Networker audience, that's what we're here about. We're here about the threads of connectivity, and that I think that the message you just gave us a short one, to be honest, because when I think of all the ground you covered, coming out of the Fortune 500 myself, you think getting tired of the Fortune 500, the large companies, for entrepreneurs or people with that entrepreneurial spirit, you get exhausted, right? It's the corporate bureaucracy chokes you. So you're an entrepreneur at heart, aren't you?
I am. And, my wife will tell you, she's been in HR for a long period of career. So she does all these assessments on me routinely, and making sure that I know what my strengths and my weaknesses are as an executive.
Here's what my wife says. Has she found any yet? That's what my wife usually asks about me.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. But she says you have one of the blessings and the curse of one of the strengths being restorative, and my restorativeness allows me to fix problems and solve problems. Number one, identify the problem. Number two, fix the problem. And some of that does come into an entrepreneurial spirit, but there's always a better way to improve, have continuous process improvement. Pharmacy's always been like that.
Right.
And that's kind of like been my mainstay. I just have this uncanny knack of kind of seeing where the problem is and knowing how to fix it quickly.
Yeah, and the courage to go say, you know what, there's a better way. Let's go try it. And sometimes we try it and it fails, and sometimes we try it and it works.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, that's not, it's a great point, because it's not easy to, we use the term in the industry, call someone's baby ugly, and you can go into an asset or a company, or even take a brand new job and say, hey, you know what, this does not make any sense.
Right.
Even though you're generating a lot of money doing it this way, there's better ways to do this. And, how you deliver that and how you influence people, how you pull them in and get them to buy into the process change is critical, and how you build a culture of not resting on your laurels or, continuing status quo methodologies or mentalities. There's an knack to doing that. I do credit that to some of my football upbringing and some of my football experiences, that it's not easy to get everybody on the same page, even in the locker room or even some of your teammates, but you do. And once you develop the common cause and everyone rowing in the same direction, it becomes quite easy from there.
When you look from the outside at a well-oiled team and a well-oiled machine, right? You look from the outside, it's like, man, that thing's running great. That's pretty cool. But you don't see all the ugliness and the intensity of what it took to get to that well-oiled machine, right? It's not easy.
That's right.
Not easy.
And one thing you talked about earlier, it's just the trust factor, and it's, I've coached youth sports and I've coached at the high school level here in Chicago. And, you could have 11 of the best, talented athletes on your team and still lose to a team with a bunch of mediocre players who are all playing with a sincere sense of chemistry, and they love and they trust each other in what they're doing. And that is way more powerful than someone with a bunch of skills. Now, if you can get everybody with the skills and with team chemistry, and they love and they trust each other, that is where that's where the magic really happens, and dynasties are created over time.
You mentioned coaching youth sports there a little bit. Talk about networking in relationship to coaching, volunteering your time to coach. What was your experience here? Did you meet any cool people along the way?
Oh man, did I meet some cool people. Met some cool people, coached some cool kids, that end up doing some great things. And it's funny because one of them is one of my closest friends as of today. Now, I never met Jim until I actually moved here, and our kids were playing youth football sports together, and he was a police officer here in the Chicagoland area, and he just had a love for football, and we have become close friends ever since from there. But the networking of that it has its pros and its cons. I mean, it's not everything is rainbows and roses, particularly in the youth sport level area. But there's way more good than not. And the networking piece of it has been just tremendous, from the people in the community and what they do, and how, the kids. And I think what is probably the most enjoyable for me to see is that my son still networks with all of his players today. When we first started this around, where I grew up in the high school I went to, I mean, my son Noah still connects with all of his key people that we played together with, and even those coaches that we played with. And unfortunately, two of the coaches who I've coached with at youth football for a long period of time have since passed away. And my son Noah and I will just talk, and we will reminisce, and we have pictures, and we just talk about things, and we have videos, and but the networking of not only from my perspective with the cool people who I've been around to coach with and be able to experience things with, it even extends even further to my son, which is incredibly gratifying.
If you had come to me when my children were young and said, Rick, you need to take some time off work to coach. And most folks said, oh man, I got to go coach and take time from work. And then it's like, no, Rick, you can go meet CEOs of billion-dollar companies while you're coaching and get to coach against them. I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me that?
Oh, I know.
Right?
Life would have been so much easier.
Yeah, everyone would coach.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it.
So, hey, in our last few minutes here together, tell me about your family. You mentioned your wife and your son, your daughter. So tell me about your family.
Yeah. So I in all transparency, I have a blended family,
Okay.
So my son Noah and Caitlin, and Mariah were from my first. And my wife now, Monica, has had two kids, Emily and Allie. So we were a blended family of five, and
Right.
we are just coming up on the 11th year of our first date, which was so cool. And she is my rock, and she's my steady. She gets me, I get her, and it really, really works. But
Nice.
Noah's our oldest. He's going to be 25 in July, and he's made a life for himself. He's working in Kalamazoo, Michigan, in the hospitality industry. My daughter Caitlin has finished her schooling from Ole Miss, so she was our SEC grad down in Oxford, and she's working here in the Chicagoland area. Our third, Mariah, turns 21 next month, and she is going to be graduating from the University of Minnesota in December. She is, don't laugh, studying neuroscience and pharmacology at the University of Minnesota. She's going to graduate a year early, and then she's going to go to med school after that, deciding on what she wants to do. Allie just turned 16, and she's going to be a junior in high school here. And then Emmy is going to be in 8th grade next year. So it's a wonderful blended family of five. And for those people who never knew that I was divorced before, would say you guys look like you were all part of the same family, and they act like it too. So I'm incredibly blessed and fortunate to have Monica and everybody else in my life there.
The kids sound like they're doing well. You sound like you're doing well. I tell you, Al, we could carry this conversation on for hours because there's so many great things to explore about your learning experiences and the networking along the way, and how that networking played into your relationships that carried you through your career. We could talk for hours and hours, right? There's so many good things.
Yeah, for sure. I had this on my desk. Rick, you'll appreciate this. We're one big Team Toledo, man.
Team Toledo. I like it.
Yes, for sure.
I tell you,
so it's
the Rocket football and athletic program is doing great. Brian Blair and his folks have come in and just augmented an already great program. And there's a lot of good things. The University of Toledo Pharmacy College is on fire, doing great things, bringing students from around the world to Northwest Ohio, and then turning and shipping them back all over the world to change the world. So you're one of those products. No, you're out there changing the world.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you carving out some time to allow me to be part of the Rocket Networker broadcast series here. I have an incredible special place in my heart for University of Toledo, and including the folks who I continue to stay close to from the Toledo Alumni Network area. And again, can't thank the College of Pharmacy enough. My three coaches that I had, Danny Simroland, Nick Saban, and Gary Pinkel, and the whole university and the community of Toledo that's surrounded. I mean, the University of Toledo is only as strong as the community that supports it, and Toledo's fortunate to have some really excellent support, including people like yourself. Getting the word out is incredibly gratifying. I appreciate all that you do there.
Well, thank you for that, and well said. There's a lot of great people in the Rocket Nation. So listen, Al, once again, I'm grateful for you making time in your busy schedule here to share your journey with the audience. It's very meaningful and impactful, so thank you.
My pleasure, Rick.
And that's it for this episode of the Rocket Networker podcast. Now it's time to launch connections to ignite your success. And the key question is, are you ready? To schedule a Rocket Networker training program or keynote speech, go to rocketnetworker.com. It's time to launch connections to ignite your success. Are you ready?